The conference room at Sterling Manufacturing felt like a courtroom that morning, and I was clearly the defendant. The mahogany table that had witnessed 40 years of business deals and family meetings now served as the stage for my final humiliation. I sat in my usual spot, third chair on the left, the seat I'd occupied for 8 years, far enough from the head to know my place but close enough to hear every word that would seal my fate. Outside, Detroit's October rain hammered against the windows like it was trying to get in and witness the execution. My name is Matthew Sterling. I'm 37 years old, and for 8 years I worked as operations manager at Sterling Manufacturing, the automotive parts company my grandfather built from nothing in 1963. I say worked because that gray morning in October changed everything, though I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was just another disappointment in a long line of disappointments. Another Sterling who couldn't quite measure up to my younger brother's shine. Turns out, the truth was more complicated than any of us knew, buried in legal documents and family secrets that would take 3 years to surface. As we discussed in the partners' meeting, my father, Robert Sterling, began, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and disappointment he'd perfected over my lifetime. Changes need to be made. The company is evolving, and we need leadership that can take us into the future. He stood at the head of the table like a general addressing his troops, though his gray suit was Armani, not military issue. At 68, Robert Sterling still cut an imposing figure, 6 feet of rigid posture and harder judgment, silver hair swept back like armor against criticism. He'd run Sterling Manufacturing for 25 years with an iron fist wrapped in a silk glove, and I'd spent most of my life trying to earn even a nod of approval from him. Which is why, he continued, his steel-gray eyes finding mine with laser precision. Effective immediately, David Sterling will be assuming the role of Chief Operating Officer. David, my younger brother by 5 years, yet somehow always 5 steps ahead. Yale MBA to my state school engineering degree. Married to a congressman's daughter while I was still recovering from a divorce that had cost me everything except my job. The golden son who'd spent more time on golf courses with clients than on factory floors with workers, but who somehow deserved to run operations he'd never operated. Congratulations, David, I managed, because that's what you do when your brother gets handed the kingdom. You smile and congratulate and pretend your chest doesn't feel like someone parked a truck on it. Thanks, Matt, he said, flashing that perfect smile that had charmed investors since he was 25. I'm looking forward to implementing some real changes around here. Streamlining operations, cutting the fat, making us lean and mean for the 21st century. Cutting the fat. I wondered if he realized he was looking at me when he said it. Now, Matthew, my father said, and the use of my full name was never a good sign. This restructuring affects your position as well. Here it comes, I thought. The demotion disguised as a lateral move. The reassignment to some forgotten corner of the company where I could be safely ignored. Your performance has been adequate, he continued, damning me with faint praise. But adequate isn't enough anymore. David will need his own team, people who share his vision for the future. People who understand that this is a business, not a charity. I've never treated it as a charity, I said quietly. Caring about our workers' safety isn't charity. Making sure they have decent health care isn't. Is exactly the kind of outdated thinking that's holding us back. David interrupted smoothly. Do you know what our competitors spend on employee benefits? Half what we do. That's money that could go to expansion, innovation, market domination. Or to your bonus, I said before I could stop myself. The room went silent. 20 faces turned to stare. Board members, senior managers, my father's longtime associates who'd watched me grow up, but now looked at me like I'd committed blasphemy. My father's face darkened. What did you say? I should have backed down. should have apologized, made a joke, done something to defuse the situation. But 8 years of swallowing my words, of watching David get credit for my ideas, of seeing my father's approval always just out of reach. It all came bubbling up like acid. I said it would go to his bonus. Like the Hutchinson contract I negotiated that he took credit for. Like the efficiency improvements I implemented that he presented as his own. Like every good thing I've done for this company that somehow becomes David's achievement by the time it reaches your desk. "How dare you?" David started, but our father held up a hand. "Matthew," he said, each syllable dropping like a hammer on an anvil. "Let me make something crystal clear to you. You are not a partner in this firm. You are not an equal. You are an employee. A mid-level manager who exists here because I allow it. Because despite your limitations, you occasionally contribute something useful." Each word was a carefully placed cut, designed to bleed but not kill. This was Robert Sterling at his finest, the man who'd crushed unions and competitors with equal efficiency, now turning that skill on his own son. "David is the future of this company," he continued. "He has the vision, the connections, the killer instinct needed to survive in this market. You," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're a relic, a bleeding heart who thinks business is about making friends instead of money. You want to coddle workers? Go teach kindergarten. This is the real world." "The real world," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. "Where we cut corners on safety to save pennies. Where we offshore jobs to save dollars. Where we destroy communities that depend on us to make quarterly numbers look better. Where we do what's necessary to survive." My father shot back. "But you wouldn't understand that. You've never had to build anything. You've just coasted on the Sterling name, contributing the minimum, expecting the maximum." "I've worked 60-hour weeks for 8 years, I said, my voice rising. "I've saved this company millions in efficiency improvements. I've kept our safety record spotless while every competitor has had injuries, deaths. But none of that matters because I'm not David. I've never been David." "No," my father agreed coldly. "You haven't. David is a leader. You're just a lowly employee who happens to share my last name. And if you don't like that, if you can't accept your place in the hierarchy, then there's the door." He pointed to the conference room exit like he was showing a dog where to piss. "Is that your final word on it?" I asked quietly. "My final word?" He laughed again, that harsh sound that had haunted my childhood. "My final word is this: you're nothing special, Matthew. You're a placeholder. A warm body in a suit who could be replaced by any competent manager we pulled off the street. The only reason you've lasted this long is because I thought you might eventually grow a spine and become someone worth grooming. But you're 37 years old and still acting like an idealistic child. So yes, that's my final word. Accept your place or get out." I looked around the room, at the executives who'd eaten dinner at my parents' house, who'd watched me hit my first baseball, who now avoided my eyes like cowards. At my brother, who had the decency to look uncomfortable but not enough spine to speak up. At my father, who'd just reduced 37 years of my life to lowly employee. "You know what?" I said, standing slowly. "You're right. I am just an employee. And employees who don't like their working conditions have the right to seek employment elsewhere." "Don't be dramatic, Matthew," my mother said from her seat near the window. Eleanor Sterling rarely spoke in business meetings, but when she did, it was usually to smooth over the damage her husband caused. "Sit down. We can discuss this later as a family." "We're not a family," I said, gathering my papers. "We're a corporation that happens to share DNA. And I'm tendering my resignation, effective immediately." "You can't be serious," David said, finally finding his voice. You're going to throw away your career over hurt feelings? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm finally picking something up. My self-respect. I walked to the door, each step feeling like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. If you walk out that door, my father called after me, don't expect to come crawling back. You're done here. Done with Sterling Manufacturing. Done with this family. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the door handle. 37 years of trying to earn his approval, of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who showed up and did the work while David charmed and schmoozed and collected accolades. 37 years of being told I wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite sterling enough. I understand, I said without turning around. Goodbye, Robert. Not Dad. Not Father. Robert. His first name felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a foreign language. But it also felt right. Final. I walked out of that conference room, out of Sterling Manufacturing, out of the life I'd built in the shadow of my father's disappointment. I passed my office, former office, and actually stopped this time. 8 years of my life in that room. Awards on the walls, pictures on the desk, a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Manager," that someone had given me as a joke, but which now seemed prophetic. I took nothing. Let them clean it out. Let them erase me the way they'd always wanted to. The security guard at the front desk, Walter, looked surprised to see me leaving in the middle of the day without even a briefcase. Everything all right, Mr. Sterling? Everything's perfect, Walter. Take care of yourself. And I hesitated, then decided what the hell. Start looking for another job. David's streamlining is going to hit security first. I've seen the plans. Walter's face went pale, but he nodded. Thanks for the heads up, Mr. Sterling. You always were the only one who gave a damn about us regular folks. Regular folks. Just another lowly employee, like me. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Engine off, watching the rain streak down the windshield. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from colleagues who'd heard what happened, calls from my mother, probably damage control attempts. I turned it off. The drive to my apartment felt like traveling between worlds. From the industrial sprawl of Sterling Manufacturing to the modest complex where I'd lived since the divorce. Karen had gotten the house. She'd earned it, putting up with my work schedule and family drama for 7 years. I got the apartment and the realization that I'd been married to my father's approval more than to her. Inside, I sat on my second-hand couch and tried to figure out what came next. I had savings enough for a few months if I was careful. My resume was solid, even if it only showed one employer for nearly a decade. But Detroit's manufacturing sector was shrinking, and jobs at my level weren't exactly thick on the ground. The next few weeks were a blur of recruitment agencies and networking events. I quickly learned that the Sterling name was both a blessing and a curse. Everyone knew Sterling Manufacturing, respected the company's reputation. But they also knew I was Robert Sterling's son, and word traveled fast in Detroit's industrial circles. I'm sorry, one interviewer said after a promising conversation turned cold. We just don't think you'd be a good fit for our corporate culture. Translation: we don't want to risk Robert Sterling's wrath by hiring his estranged son. After 2 months of rejections, I stopped mentioning the family connection. Started going by Matt Stevens on applications, close enough to not be a complete lie but different enough to avoid immediate recognition. It helped, but starting over at 37 wasn't easy. Entry-level positions looked at my experience with suspicion. Senior positions wanted to know why I'd left my last job so abruptly. I finally found work at a small machine shop on the east side, Rodriguez Custom Parts. The owner, Miguel Rodriguez, either didn't know or didn't care about my family connections. He needed someone who understood manufacturing, could manage a small team, and wasn't too proud to get their hands dirty when needed. "You're overqualified," he said bluntly during the interview. "You'll be making half what you're used to, working twice as hard. Why would you want this job?" "Because you build things that matter," I said honestly. "Because your workers' kids' pictures are on the break room wall. Because when I asked about safety protocols, you spent 20 minutes showing me every precaution you take instead of talking about acceptable loss ratios." He hired me on the spot. The work was hard. Harder than anything I'd done at Sterling Manufacturing, where my biggest physical challenge had been walking from meeting to meeting. But it was also real in a way that felt revolutionary. When we fixed a problem, it stayed fixed. When we improved a process, the workers benefited directly. When someone had an idea, it was heard and credited properly. "You're different from most managers I've had," Luis, one of the welders, told me one day. "You actually listen, actually care. Where'd you learn that?" "From watching how not to do it," I said, and he laughed like I was joking. 6 months into the job, I got my first raise. Not much by Sterling standards. What I made in a month now, I used to spend on a single business dinner. But Miguel called me into his office, showed me the books, explained how the increase was possible because our efficiency improvements had boosted profits. "You're doing good work, Matt," he said. "The men respect you. That's not easy to earn." Respect. Such a simple thing, but I realized I'd never really had it at Sterling. Fear, maybe. Deference to the family name. But not respect. A year passed. I moved to a better apartment, nothing fancy but in a safer neighborhood. Started dating Maria, a nurse who worked at the clinic next door to the shop. She didn't care about the Sterling name or manufacturing dynasties. She cared that I showed up when I said I would, that I listened when she talked about her day, that I could fix her car when it broke down. "You're handy for a management type," she said once, watching me change her oil. "I wasn't always management," I said, then realized it was true. Whatever I'd been at Sterling Manufacturing, it wasn't really management. It was playing a role, wearing a costume that never quite fit. Year 2 brought unexpected challenges. Miguel had a heart attack. Survived, thank God, but it forced him to step back. He asked me to take over more responsibilities, essentially running the shop while he recovered. "I can't pay you what you're worth," he admitted from his hospital bed. "But I can give you something else. Partnership. 20% of the business, increasing to 40 over 5 years if you stay." Partnership. The thing I'd never been offered at my own family's company. "I'll think about it," I said, but we both knew I'd already decided. Running Rodriguez Custom Parts was nothing like the corporate games at Sterling. No politics, no backstabbing, just the daily challenge of keeping orders filled and workers paid. We were small, but we were good. Word spread. Orders increased. We hired more workers, all local kids who needed a chance. I instituted profit sharing, remembering David's sneer about employee benefits. Funny thing, when workers directly benefited from increased efficiency, efficiency increased. When they knew their ideas would be heard and rewarded, ideas flowed. When they felt secure in their jobs, they worked harder to protect them. "You're building something special here," Maria said one evening, looking over the books I'd brought home. We'd been living together for 6 months, her practical nature balancing my tendency to overthink. "Miguel was right to make you partner. It's not exactly Sterling Manufacturing," I said. "No," she agreed. "It's better. It's yours." Year 3 started like any other, early morning coffee, reviewing orders, checking in with the floor teams. We'd grown to 30 employees, still small but mighty. I'd learned everyone's names, their kids' names, their worries and dreams. It was everything Sterling Manufacturing hadn't been: personal, purposeful, profitable because of our values, not despite them. Then, on a random Thursday in March, everything changed. I was in the office, going over a proposal for a new contract, when Luis knocked on the door. "Matt, there's an old guy here to see you. Says he's family." My stomach dropped. Had my father finally decided to twist the knife? Send David to gloat? But when I walked out to the shop floor, I saw a figure I hadn't expected. Grandpa Joe. Joseph Sterling, founder of Sterling Manufacturing, now 91 years old but still sharp as the tools we used. He stood among the machinery like he belonged there, like the decades of corporate polish hadn't erased the mechanic who'd started with one lathe and a dream. "Matthew," he said, and coming from him, my full name sounded like a benediction instead of a judgment. "You're hard to find." "Grandpa." I hugged him, surprised by how frail he felt. "How did you?" "I may be old, but I'm not dead. I keep tabs on my grandchildren, even the ones who've been excommunicated." His eyes, the same gray as my father's but warmer, took in the shop. "Nice operation. Reminds me of my place back in '63. Do you want to come to the office?" "I can. Actually," he said, reaching into his coat. "I just came to give you this. Should have done it years ago, but, well, timing is everything in business and family." He handed me a manila envelope, thick with age and secrets. "What is this?" "The truth," he said simply. "About Sterling Manufacturing. About your inheritance. About why your father was so desperate to keep you in your place." My hands shook slightly as I took the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should, weighted with implications. "Grandpa, read it," he said. "Tonight when you're alone. Then decide what you want to do with the information. I won't tell you how to play your cards. God knows I've made enough mistakes in that department. But you deserve to know what cards you're holding." He turned to go, then paused. "You did the right thing walking away. I should have told you that 3 years ago. Hell, I should have done it myself 40 years ago. But the company, it becomes like a drug. You tell yourself you'll quit tomorrow. Then tomorrow there's another deal, another opportunity, another reason to stay." "Is Dad?" "Your father is what I made him," Grandpa Joe said sadly. "I taught him that winning was everything, that family was just another asset to leverage. I created the monster, and now I get to watch it devour itself." He met my eyes. "But you got out. You broke the cycle. Whatever's in that envelope, remember that. You already won the only game that matters." He left without another word, and I stood there holding the envelope like it might explode. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything but the weight of old paper in my desk drawer. Finally, that evening, alone in my apartment while Maria worked a night shift, I opened it. The first document was a birth certificate. Mine. Nothing unusual there. The second was a legal document I didn't recognize at first. Lots of whereas and heretofores in that dense language lawyers used to hide simple truths. Then I saw it. My name. And next to it, a percentage, 51%. I read it again. Then the whole document, start to finish, my hands beginning to shake as I understood what I was looking at. This was the original incorporation document for Sterling Manufacturing. And according to this, not my father, not David, but I owned 51% of the company. There was a letter attached, written in my grandmother's careful script. She died when I was 10, but I'd never forgotten her handwriting. The way she'd signed birthday cards with little hearts over the eyes. "My dearest Matthew, if you're reading this, then Joe finally found the courage to give you what I left in his keeping. I'm sorry it took so long. Men and their pride, it'll be the death of us all. When Sterling Manufacturing was incorporated, I was the one with the money. Inheritance from my father, who never trusted that Sterling boy I'd married but loved me enough to leave me independently wealthy. Joe had the ideas and the skill, but I had the capital. So we made a deal. The company would be in both our names, but I would maintain controlling interest, 51% to my 49%. It was protection, you see, in case Joe's ambitions ever overtook his sense. When I got sick, I knew I wouldn't see you grow up, but I watched you, even as a baby, and I saw something in you that I didn't see in your father or in David. Kindness, the ability to see people, not just profits. So I left my shares to you in trust, to be revealed on your 21st birthday. Except that birthday came and went, and Joe couldn't bear to tell you, or your father. He was afraid, I think. Afraid of what Robert would do. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of admitting that the empire he'd built wasn't entirely his. So he kept voting your shares by proxy, letting your father believe he'd inherit everything, letting the lie grow until it became too big to expose. But lies have a way of rotting foundations, and I suspect by the time you read this, the rot will be showing. Whatever you decide to do with this information, know that I loved you and believed in you, even when you were too young to remember me. The company is yours, Matthew. The question is, what will you do with it? All my love, Grandma Rose. I set the letter down with trembling hands. 51%. For 37 years, I'd been the majority owner of Sterling Manufacturing and never knew it. Every meeting where I'd been dismissed, every time my father had called me just an employee, I'd actually been his boss. The irony was so perfect it hurt. There were more documents. Financial statements showing that Grandpa Joe had been depositing dividends from my shares into a trust account. 37 years of profits, compounding quietly. The number at the bottom of the most recent statement made me dizzy. Not hundreds of thousands. Millions. Many millions. I'd been rich my entire life and lived like I was middle class. I'd begged for approval from men who worked for me. I'd accepted scraps from a table I owned. But more than the money, more than the control, what hit me was the deception. Grandpa Joe had known. My father must have suspected. It would explain so much about his treatment of me. His desperation to keep me small, manageable, ignorant. And David, did he know? Was his elevation to COO an attempt to maintain family control before I discovered the truth? I called in sick the next day, something I'd never done at Rodriguez. Spent hours with a lawyer verifying the documents were real, understanding my options. Everything checked out. The incorporation papers were legitimate. The trust was real. The shares were mine. You could take control immediately, the lawyer said, barely containing his excitement at the case. Walk in there, call a board meeting, fire everyone. It's your company. My company. The words felt alien. What else could I do? Sell. With that percentage, you could force a buyout. Sterling Manufacturing is worth. Well, let's just say you'd never have to work again. Your children's children's children wouldn't have to work. Or you could do nothing. Continue as you are. The dividends alone are substantial. You could live very comfortably without ever setting foot in Sterling Manufacturing again. 3 options. Take control, take the money, or take the high road. Each had its appeal. Each had its cost. That night, I told Maria everything. Showed her the documents, the bank statements, the proof that I'd been living a lie for 37 years. She listened without interrupting, her face cycling through the same shock and disbelief I'd felt. My God, she said when I finished. You own it. You actually own it. They tortured you for years, and you owned it the whole time. What do I do? I asked. What do you want to do? Part of me wants to walk in there tomorrow and fire them all. Show up at the next board meeting and watch their faces when I prove I'm the majority shareholder. Take everything they denied me. But that's revenge, not justice. And what would I do with Sterling Manufacturing? I've built something here, something I'm proud of. Rodriguez Custom Parts means something to me in a way Sterling never did. Maria was quiet for a moment. You could do both. What? Keep Rodriguez. Take Sterling. Merge them. Use the big company's resources to support the small company's values. Show your father and David what you could have done if they'd ever given you the chance. It was tempting, so tempting. Or, she continued, you could sell your shares back to them. Take the money, invest it in Rodriguez, build something entirely your own. Let them have their empire while you build something better. Or I could just leave it alone. Let Grandpa Joe keep voting my shares. Pretend I never saw these documents. Could you live with that? Knowing what you know? I thought about it. About every slight, every dismissal, every time I'd been made to feel less than. About my father's sneer when he called me a lowly employee. About David's smirk when he took credit for my work. No, I admitted. I couldn't. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and soul-searching. I had the lawyer draft several scenarios, takeover plans, buyout proposals, even a simple assertion of voting rights that would let me control from the shadows. But none of them felt right. Then, on the fourth day, I realized what I had to do. Not for revenge or justice or even vindication, but for the workers at Sterling Manufacturing who'd spent years under my father's thumb, who faced David's streamlining with no one to protect them. I video called Grandpa Joe that night. He looked tired but unsurprised when I told him I knew. I wondered when you'd call, he said. What are you going to do? First, I want to know why. Why keep it secret so long? Why let me suffer? He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 91 years. Fear, pride, stupidity, pick your poison. When your grandmother first set it up, I was grateful. Her money saved my dream. But as the company grew, I started to resent it. Resent her. Resent the fact that my empire wasn't entirely mine. So you hid it. I told myself I was protecting you, that you were too young to handle that kind of responsibility. 21 came and went, and you were in college, happy, free. I didn't want to burden you with the company. Then you graduated, joined the business, and I thought maybe it would be better if you earned your place without knowing. Proved yourself on merit, not inheritance. But I did prove myself, over and over, and it was never enough. Because your father knew, Grandpa Joe admitted. Not the specifics, but he suspected. Why else would I insist on keeping you around despite his objections? He spent 20 years trying to minimize you, hoping that when the truth came out, you'd be too beaten down to fight for what's yours. Almost worked, I said bitterly. But it didn't. You walked away. You built something new. You became the man I hoped you'd be, just not in the way I expected. He leaned forward. So I'll ask again, what are you going to do? I told him my plan. He listened, his expression shifting from surprise to something that might have been pride. That's not what I expected, he admitted. I'm done living by Sterling expectations, I said. Time to create some of my own. The next Monday, I put my plan into motion. First, a certified letter to Sterling Manufacturing's board of directors, asserting my ownership and calling for an emergency meeting. Then, a press release to Detroit's major newspapers, carefully timed to hit after the board was notified but before they could spin it. Local teacher discovers he owns majority stake in Sterling Manufacturing. The headlines would read, I changed it from manager to teacher. If I was burning bridges, might as well torch them completely. The phone calls started within hours. My father, apoplectic with rage. David alternating between threats and pleas. Board members I'd known since childhood, suddenly very interested in my well-being and opinions. I ignored them all, let them stew, let them wonder what I planned. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. I spent the intervening days preparing, working with lawyers and accountants and a PR firm that specialized in corporate transitions. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. Thursday morning, I put on my best suit. Still off the rack, but it fit better than any sterling uniform ever had. Maria kissed me goodbye, Miguel wished me luck, and I drove to Sterling Manufacturing for the first time in 3 years. The building looked the same, all glass and steel and intimidation. But I felt different walking through those doors. Not like an employee reporting for duty, but like an owner returning to claim what was his. The security guard, not Walter, I noticed, probably a casualty of David's streamlining, tried to stop me. "I'm sorry, sir, but you need an appointment." "I own the building," I said simply. "Check your list." Emergency board meeting, 9 a.m. His eyes widened as he checked his computer. "Mr. Sterling? Matthew Sterling? But you're on the no-access list." "Not anymore," I said. "And it's just Matt. Matt Stevens, actually. I'm changing it legally next week." The conference room was already full when I arrived. My father sat at the head of the table, my table technically, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. David sat to his right, for once not checking his phone. The board members arrayed around them like soldiers preparing for battle. "Matthew," my father started, but I held up a hand. "Let's keep this professional, Robert. You can call me Mr. Stevens. Or, if you prefer, majority shareholder." I took a seat. Not at the head, that would be petty, but halfway down the table. Close enough to be heard. Far enough to show I wasn't here for dramatics. "I assume you've all reviewed the documentation my lawyers sent," I began. "Any questions about its authenticity?" Silence. They'd had their own lawyers review it, of course. The paperwork was bulletproof. Good. Then let's discuss the future of Sterling Manufacturing. "You can't just..." David started, but I cut him off. "I can actually. That's what 51% means. But I'm not here to stage a coup. I'm here to propose a transformation." I stood, pulled out the presentation I'd prepared. Old school, printed copies instead of PowerPoint. Sometimes the basics work best. "Sterling Manufacturing has lost its way," I began. "What started as one man's dream to build quality parts has become a machine for generating profits at any cost. Workers are numbers. Communities are revenue sources. Safety is a budget line to be minimized." "That's business," Robert said coldly. "That's bad business," I countered. "Rodriguez Custom Parts, my company, has grown 300% in 3 years. Our employee retention is 95%. Our safety record is perfect. Our profits are strong and sustainable. Why? Because we treat workers like humans, not resources." "Rodriguez is a tiny shop," David protested. "You can't scale that model." "Watch me," I said, "because that's exactly what I'm going to do. Sterling Manufacturing is going to become a subsidiary of Rodriguez Custom Parts. We're going to implement profit sharing across the board, increase safety spending by 50%, bring back the jobs we've offshored, and we're going to do it while remaining profitable." "That's insane," someone said. "That's the future," I corrected. "The old way of doing business is dying. Consumers care about ethics. Workers have options. Communities have memories. We can evolve or we can perish. And if we refuse?" Robert asked, though we both knew it was an empty threat. "Then I'll liquidate the company and use the proceeds to build something new, something better. Your choice." The room erupted in arguments, pleas, threats. I let them rage, sitting quietly while they processed their new reality. The lowly employee they'd dismissed now held their futures in his hands. Finally, when the noise died down, I continued. I'm not unreasonable. Those who want to stay and help build something better are welcome. Full transparency, though, there will be changes. Executive compensation will be capped at 50 times the lowest worker's wage. No more golden parachutes. No more prioritizing shareholders over stakeholders. And if we leave? David asked. Then you leave. With standard severance, not the obscene packages you've given yourselves. You'll have to find new jobs like any other employee. You're destroying everything we've built, Robert said. And for the first time in my life, he sounded old, defeated. No, I said gently. I'm trying to save it. Grandpa Joe built this company with his hands and Grandma Rose's heart. Somewhere along the way, we kept the hands but lost the heart. I'm just trying to get it back. The transition took months. Some board members stayed, embracing the new direction. Others left, predicting doom and disaster. David lasted exactly 1 week before resigning to pursue other opportunities. He's working for a hedge fund now, which suits him perfectly, moving numbers around without ever having to see the humans they represent. My father was the surprise. I expected him to fight to the bitter end, but after that first meeting, something in him broke. Or maybe something healed. He came to my office. I'd taken a small one, not the executive suite, and for the first time in my life, spoke to me like a person instead of a disappointment. I was wrong, he said simply. About you. About the business. About what matters. Why the change? I asked, genuinely curious. Because you did what I never could. You walked away. You built something without the sterling name, without the advantages, without anything but your own merit. And then when you had the power to destroy me, you chose to build instead. He paused. Your grandmother would be proud. He stayed on as an advisor, helping navigate the transition. It wasn't easy. 37 years of hurt doesn't disappear overnight. But we found a working relationship. Not father and son, maybe, but two men trying to do better. The changes at Sterling Manufacturing were dramatic but successful. Profit-sharing motivated workers in ways fear never had. Increased safety spending paid for itself in reduced insurance costs and higher productivity. Bringing jobs back to Detroit created goodwill that no amount of PR could have bought. And Rodriguez Custom Parts? Still running, still growing. Miguel made a full recovery and jokes that his heart attack was the best thing that ever happened to the company. It brought you in, he says. And you brought change. 2 companies, 1 vision. Proof that you can do well by doing good. That treating people with respect is a business strategy, not a weakness. But the real change was personal. For 37 years, I defined myself by what I wasn't. Not good enough for my father, not ruthless enough for business, not sterling enough for the sterling name. Now I define myself by what I am. A builder, a teacher, a man who chose his own path. Maria and I got married last year in a small ceremony at Rodriguez Custom Parts. Miguel walked me down the aisle. Someone has to, he said, and I'm proud to do it. My father attended, sitting quietly in the back, wiping his eyes when he thought no one was looking. David sent a card. Congratulations. You won. I don't think he meant the company. Grandpa Joe lived to see the transformation complete. 93 years old, sharp to the end. He attended the first profit-sharing distribution at Sterling Manufacturing. Watched workers receive checks that would change their lives. Saw families crying with relief and joy. This is what I should have built, he said. What Rose wanted me to build. Thank you for finishing what we started. He died 2 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. At the funeral, workers from both companies served as pallbearers. The man who'd built an empire was carried to his rest by the people who'd made it possible. I inherited his remaining 49%, making me the sole owner of Sterling Manufacturing. The first thing I did was create an employee stock ownership plan. Over the next 10 years, the workers will buy the company from me, becoming true partners in what they build. "You're giving it away," Robert said when I told him. "Not accusing, just observing." "I'm investing it," I corrected, "in the people who make it worthwhile." That was 6 months ago. Today, Sterling Manufacturing is thriving. Not just surviving, thriving. Turns out, when you treat people like they matter, they make sure you matter too. I still work at Rodriguez most days, hands dirty, solving problems, building things. The only difference is now I know who I really am. Not a lowly employee or an unexpected owner, but a man who chose to build rather than tear down, to lift up rather than keep down. The envelope Grandpa Joe gave me 3 years ago sits framed in my office at Rodriguez. Not the legal documents, those are filed away safely, but the letter from Grandma Rose. Her words remind me daily that inheritance isn't just about what you're given, but what you choose to do with it. My father was wrong that day in the conference room. I wasn't just a lowly employee, but he was also wrong about David being the real boss. The real bosses were the workers who showed up every day, the communities we served, the future we were building together. I just happened to own the paperwork that made it official. These days, my father and I have lunch once a month. Awkward at first, but getting easier. He's 71 now, retired, spending time with grandchildren he barely knew existed. He watches how I run the companies and sometimes offers advice. Good advice, stripped of ego and focused on people instead of just profits. "I wasted so much time," he said during our last lunch, "chasing numbers instead of meaning, building walls instead of bridges." "It's not too late," I told him. "You're here now, because you gave me a second chance. Not everyone would have. Grandma Rose would have," I said. "She believed in second chances. In third and fourth chances too, if needed. She was a better person than I deserved," he said softly. "So are you. Maybe, maybe not. But I'm trying to be the person she saw in me when I was too young to remember. The person who could take an inheritance built on sharp practices and transform it into something clean. The person who could be fired as a lowly employee and return as a leader. The company is different now. The culture, the values, the very air people breathe when they walk through the doors. It's not perfect, nothing involving humans ever is, but it's honest. It's fair. It's focused on building up instead of tearing down. And that conference room where I was humiliated has been renovated. The mahogany table replaced with something local craftsmen built. The walls covered with photos of workers and their families instead of stern portraits of past executives. There's a place for collaboration now, not confrontation. I held my first all-hands meeting there last month. Stood where my father had stood and looked out at faces that trusted me to do right by them. Workers who'd been with Sterling for decades mixed with new hires brought in by our reputation for fairness. Rodriguez people and Sterling people becoming one people. 3 years ago, I told them, I was told I was just a lowly employee, that I should know my place, that I should get out if I didn't like it. I paused, looking at faces that understood exactly what that felt like. I got out, but I came back, not for revenge, not for power, but because I realized something important. "What's that, boss?" someone called out. "That there's no such thing as a lowly employee," I said. "There are only people doing their best, deserving of respect and fair treatment and the chance to build something better. You gave me that chance at Rodriguez. Now I want to give it back to you at Sterling. Together, we're proving that business doesn't have to be brutal, that success doesn't require sacrifice of principles, that a company can have a heart and still have a healthy bottom line." The applause was genuine, not the polite golf claps of board meetings, but real appreciation from people who'd seen too many promises broken to trust easily. After the meeting, Walter, the security guard I'd warned 3 years ago, stopped me. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for the warning back then. I found another job before the layoffs hit. And for bringing me back. Means a lot, having a boss who remembers the little people." "There are no little people," I said, echoing my earlier words. "Just people. And you matter as much as anyone." He smiled, shook my hand with a grip that spoke of honest work, and went back to his post. But I could see him standing taller, walking prouder. Amazing what a little respect can do. That night, I told Maria about the day while we cooked dinner together in our modest house. We could afford bigger, but why? This felt like home. "You think Robert really changed?" she asked, always the skeptic. "I think he's trying," I said. "That's all any of us can do. And David is who he is. Maybe someday he'll figure out there's more to life than winning. Maybe not. Either way, it's his journey." "You're more forgiving than I would be," she said. "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," I said. "Grandma Rose taught me that, apparently. I just didn't remember until I read her letter." We ate in comfortable silence. Two people who'd built a life on love and respect instead of money and power. Though now we had both, which was its own kind of irony. "Any regrets?" Maria asked eventually. I thought about it. About the 3 years of struggle after leaving Sterling. About the pain of rejection and the fear of failure. About the shock of learning I'd owned everything all along. "No," I said finally. "Every step led here. Even the painful ones. Maybe especially the painful ones. Even being called a lowly employee? Even that. Because it taught me that titles don't define us. Actions do. And I'd rather be a good man with no title than a powerful one with no conscience." She smiled, reached across the table to take my hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're both. Maybe, maybe not. But I'm trying." The next morning, I was back at Rodriguez, helping solve a problem with one of the lathes. Hands dirty, mind engaged, surrounded by people who called me Matt instead of Mr. Sterling or Sir. This was where I belonged, where I'd always belonged, even when I didn't know it. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that turned out to be from a business journalist. "Mr. Sterling, I'm writing a piece about the transformation at Sterling Manufacturing. The headline is, 'From Lowly Employee to Revolutionary CEO. Would you care to comment?'" I thought about it, then typed back. "I was never lowly, and I'm not revolutionary. I'm just someone who learned that the best way to lead is to serve. That the best way to build is to lift others up. That sometimes you have to leave to learn who you really are. Use that if you want." He did. The article ran the next week, featuring side-by-side photos. Me in a suit at Sterling Manufacturing. Me in work clothes at Rodriguez. Same person, different worlds, bridged by an envelope that revealed the truth. But the truth wasn't just about ownership or inheritance or long-buried secrets. The truth was simpler and more complex. We are not our titles. We are not our salaries. We are not the opinions of those who would keep us small. We are our choices, our actions, our impacts on others. And sometimes, the greatest gift isn't what we're given, but what we're driven to become when we think we have nothing. I was called a lowly employee and told to get out. So I got out, built something new, discovered my worth. Then I came back and showed them what a lowly employee could do with the chance to be more. Turns out we can change the world. One company, one worker, one choice at a time. That's my story. From employee to owner, from rejected to respected, from bitter to better. All because I stood up, walked out, and refused to accept someone else's definition of my worth. The envelope Grandpa Joe gave me contained more than legal documents and bank statements. It contained possibility. the chance to rewrite not just my story, but the story of everyone Sterling Manufacturing had stepped on while climbing to success. These days, when young workers come to me frustrated by unfair treatment or lack of opportunity, I tell them this: your worth isn't determined by your position on an org chart. Your value isn't set by someone else's evaluation. You are not just anything, not just an employee, not just a cog, not just a number on a spreadsheet. You are potential waiting to be realized, power waiting to be claimed, purpose waiting to be discovered. Sometimes that means staying and fighting for change from within. Sometimes it means leaving to build something better. Sometimes, if you're very lucky or very patient, it means both. But whatever you choose, remember this: the people who call you lowly are usually standing on foundations they didn't build, claiming credit for work they didn't do, guarding privileges they didn't earn. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a sense of humor about these things. Sometimes the lowly employee owns the company. Sometimes the rejected son holds the real power. Sometimes the one who walks away is the only one strong enough to come back and fix what's broken. I learned that the hard way, through 3 years of exile and a manila envelope full of secrets. But you don't need a hidden inheritance to claim your worth. You just need the courage to refuse anyone else's definition of who you are. My name is Matthew Sterling, soon to be Matthew Stevens, and I was once called a lowly employee by people who thought titles determined worth. They were wrong. I proved it. So can you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're like me, someone who spent years trying to earn love that was never truly offered, you know these aren't just stories. They're mirrors of our deepest wounds and greatest triumphs. Subscribe if these stories resonate with your journey. Hit that notification bell. Think of it as our regular meetup, where we share truths that others might not understand. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? What would you have done in my shoes? Your words matter to me, and they matter to everyone here who's walked this lonely path. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story. Until then, remember, family isn't always blood, and sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you truly are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.